Hello and welcome to another Gamma Sutra Producer Series video. This is Keith. Today we are in Ableton Live 12 and we're going to be looking at and talking about the Space Carver Collection for Ableton Live. The Space Carver Collection is a collection of Ableton Live effects racks, and they are available now for free for download at the Gamma Sutra Producer Series Bandcamp webpage. And I've left a link where you can find those in the description down below. These Space Carver effects racks are for multiband sidechain dynamic ducking. Essentially, these racks are a recreation using all native Ableton devices of the plugin Trackspacer by Waves Factory. And so, to set the stage for the rest of the video, I figured we would start by taking a look at the Trackspacer website to see how Trackspacer describes what it does, and then that will give us the footing for going into how Space Carver replicates that. Here at the Trackspacer website, Trackspacer creates space in a mix by carving the frequencies that a track needs. It applies an inverse EQ curve after analyzing the sidechain signal. Now you can get cleaner mixes with the turn of a knob. And you can have that for 59 British pounds, about 80 US dollars. A little bit further down here, Trackspacer. It features an internal 32-band EQ that reacts to the incoming sidechain signal. It analyzes the spectrum of the sidechain and applies a reversed EQ curve to another track. Trackspacer creates space for the primary track instantly. Okay, so that is the territory or the place in the toolkit that Trackspacer has, and it's a very useful, very helpful device. I have Trackspacer actually here up and running right now. On this first lane, Trackspacer is loaded. I have that's the drone. I have Trackspacer sidechained to my pluck down here. And yes, just with dialing the amount knob here, Trackspacer goes to work. It begins carving an inverse dynamic EQ into the drone, responding to each note of the pluck as it hits. Other primary controls that Trackspacer has is a low cut, which limits how low carving will occur. Below this cut, carving will not occur. And then the same with a high cut for the high frequencies. Okay, now that we've looked and listened a bit to that basic functionality of Trackspacer, here is Space Carver. Pretty much the same as Trackspacer, we have a carve space knob here, the same as the amount. You can see these EQs moving, already ducking the signal. In fact, I'll tell you what, we'll listen to that. Turn off Trackspacer, turn on Space Carver. Okay, so now we are listening to Space Carver. I can start here. You can see the EQs are not moving, and just as with the amount knob and Trackspacer, as I dial in carve space, those EQs start moving. 32 bands. There is another EQ8 over here. There's 4 of them altogether. 32 bands of dynamic EQ ducking responding to that pluck, carving space in that drone so the pluck can be heard. Just like Trackspacer, here we go. There is a sidechain to begin with in Space Carver, so to set it up, you go into Sidechain Me. You can see here, already sidechained to the pluck. Just as with Trackspacer, we have a low cut, limiting carving in the low frequencies, and a high cut. And those controls are here in the macros. You can see as I move high cut, that cutoff moves. Same for the low cut. Now, one additional functionality I added is a high shelf that you can either increase, add gain, or decrease, attenuate. And what this helps with is allowing you to shape the carving behavior across the spectrum. So if you want more carving in the highs, you can raise the highs in the sidechain, and that will cause deeper carving in the ducking EQs and vice versa. Okay, once you have your sidechain all set up, you just click to watch here, and you basically get the same kind of view that you have here with Space Carver. You can see those EQs doing their thing. In the racks, there's also a number of other controls here, and those replicate the advanced panel of Trackspacer. Trackspacer has attack and release controls to control onset and return to null or return to neutral of the ducking EQs. Same for Space Carver. And Trackspacer allows positioning of ducking, either left and right or in the mid-side field. And Space Carver has that same functionality here for the switch. Stereo is 0 on this macro, and mid-side mode is 1. And one more feature that Space Carver has that goes beyond what Trackspacer does. Right here down here there is a Q factor knob, and what that allows is adjustment of the Q on these individual ducking bands. And so you can actually get them very tight to be very kind of frequency specific, or you can broaden them out. As you move the Q, carving space needs to be adjusted a bit as well. Got some pretty heavy carving going on there. There we go. Okay. And so again, a little more functionality than Trackspacer. And that is it. The Trackspacer, right, from Waves Factory, the plugin, $80 US. Space Carver, free, right, for download now at the Gamma Sutra Producer Series Bandcamp webpage. In the Space Carver collection, there are 2 versions of Space Carver. There's a Space Carver 32, meeting all the specifications of Trackspacer, the plugin, or there is Space Carver 24, and that is just the 24 band version. Everything else is identical. I made the 24 band version because it is true. These Space Carver racks are Ableton native devices, and quite a few of them. And so in many cases, having 24 bands, especially with Space Carver's additional functionality, is more than sufficient to get the results that you would need. But Space Carver 24 will save you a bit of CPU. Now, beyond the Ableton native versions of these racks, I've also made some hybrid versions. And these hybrid versions I made because when you're working with the ducking array, it's easily enough done, but it is quite a bit, right, to have to scan across 3 or 4 EQ8s in the bottom tray. And so all these hybrids do is replace that ducking array with a VST equalizer. In the case of this one, Space Carver 32 Re-EQ, it uses the Reaper EQ VST, and that is available for free for download. And I have provided a link for where you can find that Reaper EQ in the documentation with the Space Carver collection. We'll switch over to that one now. So going to the drone on Space Carver 32 Re-EQ, here is the rack, right? We're looking at the sidechain for the moment. Sidechain to the pluck. You can see that same signal shaping EQ in the sidechain row. And then in watch here, when you click over, instead of seeing the row of EQ8s, we have the Re-EQ VST. We open that, and in fact, let me close that. There we go. And now you can see, right, why this is a little bit easier to work with. All 32 bands, right, are visible in a single floating VST window, a lot more like Trackspacer. In fact, that's a little bit light. Let's dial up some Q factor on these, make them a bit tighter. There we go. And then carve some more space. Yeah, check our shelf. And a little more into the highs. Okay, and a little less carving maybe. There we go. So really all the same controls, the whole front end of the rack is the same. It's just changing out the EQs for the EQ8s to instead be a VST EQ. And then finally, I have here to show Space Carver 24 Pro Q3. I'll switch over to that now. So turning off the drone on the Re-EQ hybrid and on with the Pro Q3 hybrid. The Pro Q3 version pretty much, again, the same thing as the Re-EQ version. We have the sidechain you can see here, sidechain to the pluck, our shaping EQ. When we go to view, right, we have Pro Q3 as a plugin. This, of course, requires that you own Pro Q3 already, and you can open that. And here's a very nice, right, view of your ducking array, all 24 bands. Oh, and why is there not a 32 band version of this one? Well, because the maximum number of bands on Pro Q3 or Pro Q4, 24 bands. Okay, so here again you can see all the same controls. I can work with the Q factor. I can broaden out, maybe dial back. Let's broaden that out, and then less carving, maybe about like that. Yeah, just very gentle. So this is almost more like a multiband compressor, right, when you get those Q factor settings really broad. But anyway, a lot of flexibility, right? Really able to customize, tailor your view. All right, well, that is basically it. You get all of these devices. There is one more device, a rack called Dynamic Frequency Carver. That's just a very simple, very low CPU, single band ducking EQ like these. And that is for something like when you want to duck a bass frequency out of the way of a kick. So that's included in the pack as well. Okay, well, there you have it. We have, let's see here. We have the Pro Q3 version. We can take a look at that up and running. We have the Re-EQ version. We can look at that again. Here we go. We have the all Ableton native version. All of these are in the pack. It's up to you which one you want to use. They all do the same thing. So just, some options, some choices. And that is it for this Gamma Sutra video. Keith for Gamma Sutra signing off. Yeah, and we'll see you next time with the Gamma Sutra Producer Series.